Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to the Festival of Nature 2022. My name is Sam Langford. I'm the digital producer for the Festival of Nature. Oh, we're getting close towards the end now of the festival. It was Thursday, the 16th of June, and we finish on Saturday, the 18th. We've had so many incredible events, whether they are live and in person in Bristol and Bath or taking place online. And I'm so excited for this event today. Genuinely, this is an absolute treat for me. We are going to be meeting some absolutely brilliant furry friends at Bristol Zoo Gardens. I'm going to introduce you to some staff at Bristol Zoo Gardens in just a second, who are going to introduce you to some ring-tailed lemurs. Genuinely, I'm so excited to be here. So I'm going to get them in just now. Please say hello to the wonderful folks at Bristol Zoo. We have Sam, who is one of our conservation staff. Sam, I'm going to get you to introduce yourself very first of all, if that's okay.
Yep. Hi, folks. I'm Sam Cotton, and I'm a higher education and conservation manager here at Bristol Zoo, and I oversee and run the Bristol Zoo's Madagascar programme in Madagascar.
And we've also got Sarah, who's a keeper at Bristol Zoo Gardens as well.
Hi everyone, my name's Sarah. Yeah, I'm lucky enough to look after the mammals here at Bristol Zoo, including the fabulous ring-tailed lemurs that we have joining us today.
Okay, I'm going to disappear now because I'm going to hear from you folks, and you are going to tell us a little bit about the lemurs that you've got and also some of the work that you've got going on around the world. I'm going to be sitting behind the scenes really enjoying myself, but I'll see you in a little while to ask you some questions. So over to you folks.
Fantastic, thanks so much. So yeah, me and Sam are here in the lemur walkthrough at Bristol Zoo, and we've been joined by our family group of lemurs. They've all come out, the sunshine helps, they're very much enjoying the lovely warm weather that we've got. So we've got a family group of 7 lemurs that you can see around me and at my feet. They're having a spot of lunch. We do feed them frequently throughout the day, but I put out some vegetables for them to enjoy, and they're picking out their favourite bits and pieces. But while we've got the lemurs joining us, I'll introduce you to a few of them. So we've got our family of 7, we've got our male Afu, and then we've got females and their offspring as well. And we've got every generation here at the zoo. We've got Grandma Muriel, and then we've got her twin daughters, Ethel and Mavis. And then we've got Ethel and Mavis's kids as well. So Ethel's got 2 daughters in the group, one called Theo and one called Sylvie. And Mavis has got a daughter called Maureen. Now, lemurs are really interesting because they've got quite a unique social structure. So here comes Afu. He's our male, but he's actually the lowest ranking animal in the group. So he is a little bit henpecked, and that's because females are actually the dominant sex in ring-tailed lemurs. So Afu's rather popular for a couple of months a year when we're in breeding season, but the rest of the time it very much is bottom of the pecking order. And as you can see, he's kind of looking for bits of pieces of food that the females have left. Now, if we look at Afu, because he has come to join us, he's a little bit bigger than the females. The males tend to be around 3 kilos. He looks very similar, but he has got a few distinguishing features. The most obvious one is his scent glands. So he's actually got a spur under his wrist that he'll use to mark his scent in his territory. And he does that by scraping the spur into branches and then rubbing his scent onto that. And you'll also see if there are other males around. We haven't got any males in the group, so Afu's very lucky he's got all the girls himself. But in the wild, they can live in really big groups, up to 20, with multi-males and multi-females. And if Afu did have to compete with any other males, they actually have stick fights the males to win the affections of the females. So he will actually rub his scent also on his tail from that wrist scent gland and waft it around in the other males' faces. And the smelliest lemur wins the access to the females, believe it or not. But Afu's very chill because he hasn't got much to worry about here. He's got all the females to himself. But as I say, he's bottom of the pecking order most of the time. So here you can see our cheeky females joining us. This is Sylvie, one of our resident teenagers. And then just further round is her mum and her siblings and her aunties as well. Just down here on the ground is Muriel. She's grandma of the group. You can see she's a little bit slower placed because she's a little bit older, and she's our biggest female. She's no longer breeding, but she very much has a grandma role. She's very kind of steady and stable member of our group and a huge fan with the keepers as well. She's very much one of our favourites. And then her 2 daughters, Ethel and Mavis, have been our breeding female in the last couple of years, and we've bred ring-tailed lemurs really successfully here at the zoo, which is fantastic. But their most recent offspring are growing up now. They're becoming teenagers of their own, and they're starting to cycle as well. So we'll be looking to move them on when we can, so they can go elsewhere and have the opportunity to breed themselves. And the reason we have ring-tailed lemurs here, and we do try to breed them, is because they are an endangered species. So they are quite a rare primate out in Madagascar where they come from. So every single one of them is precious, and we do our bit to contribute to the captive breeding program here in Europe. They're also, of course, fantastic ambassadors for their species. Ring-tailed lemurs in particular are very charismatic species of lemur. They're really popular with guests and staff alike, and you can see why. They add so much energy, and they're beautiful looking lemurs with their stripy black and white tails. And as they walk along, you can see them sticking those tails in the air, which makes them look amazing, but also it does have a point, it helps them be able to see each other. So they do live in these big groups in the wild, and if that tail's waving about in the air, it is so striking. It means the rest of the family group know where you are, and they can all keep together and see each other. And you notice they are spending a bit of time on the ground, so ring-tailed lemurs are a bit more terrestrial than other lemur species. So they're really adaptable, so they will spend time on the ground, but they'll also spend time leaping from branch to branch in the dry forests of Madagascar. And they are very much jumpers rather than climbers. You see them leaping from branch to branch. It's quite spectacular. And again, those tails really help them because they add that little bit of balance when they're leaping from branch to branch, and to give them that little bit more stability. Here comes Muriel again, hoping for some extra food. I'm afraid it's all gone, Muriel. She's heading on back inside. The lemurs do really enjoy this hot weather because they come from Madagascar, which has a hot climate, and they come from quite a dry part of south-west Madagascar. So hot days like this are perfect for the lemurs. They're very much in their element. And ring-tailed lemurs are quite unique, and they like to sunbathe. So you will see them sitting in the direction of the sun. You know, kind of almost like they're practicing a little bit of yoga, striking their poses. No one's 100% sure why they do that and why they enjoy it so much, but there is thinking that the hot, warm sunshine on their belly does help them digest their food. But we'll often see them all lined up together, sitting, doing their little yoga poses, enjoying the sunshine. Hello, girls. I haven't got any more food, I'm afraid. But when it is hot, they need the opportunity to cool down, just like we do. So we do give them an opportunity if they've got shade and they can go inside, but we like to give them nice cooling treats from time to time as well. So we'll give them things like ice lollies that we'll make out of fruit tea, which they really enjoy because they're delicious, but it also does give them a chance to cool down a little bit in this hot weather. But as you can see, they're very much thriving. They love the walk through. There's lots of shady patches for them to retreat into. But also they can eat a lot of things that are grown in the enclosure here as well. And out in the wild, they would eat things like leaves, flowers, fruits when it's available, and even insects as well. So they are quite adaptable in their diet. So there's lots of things they can eat here. The diet that we provide in the zoo is vegetable based. So we don't provide them with too much fruit. And the reason for that is that fruit that we cultivate is very much to our tastes. It is quite sweet with quite high water content. So nutritionally, it's not actually that similar to the wild fruits that they might find in Madagascar. So instead, we give them mostly vegetables, which are much more similar to the wild fruit that they would eat out in Madagascar. So much higher kind of fibre content and nutrients and things that they need to keep them fit and healthy. And our group are in really good shape. They are really fit and healthy. Lots of exercise this time of year, and lots of scope for them to bounce around from branch to branch. We also weigh them quite regularly as well, so we keep on top of that so that we can see and make sure everyone's doing okay. And most of our older females and our males average around 3 kilos. The teenage girls are a little bit younger, weigh a little bit less. They are very much catching up with their parents now and getting a little bit bigger. We do find the younger animals are a little bit more active as well, so they're burning the calories, whereas you can see Muriel sitting on the ground there is more than happy to chill.
Oh, we may have lost a little bit of connection, folks, with the team at the zoo. Hopefully we'll be back very, very shortly with them. Well, you're left with this really nice image of a ring-tailed lemur walking towards us. Whilst we're waiting for their connection to come back, Please do tell us where you're watching from. You can do that in the chat and tell us where in the world you may be watching. Are you in Bristol and Bath? Are you watching from further afield? And do you have any questions for the team at Bristol Zoo Gardens as well? They'll hopefully be back online with us very, very shortly. The nature of online events, that sometimes technology can fail on you, especially at the time when you really want it to keep going for us. So give them a second and hopefully they'll rejoin the stream. In the meantime, we have lots of other events coming up as part of the Festival of Nature 2022. As I said, we've just got a few days left. Please do check out festivalofnature.org.uk, where you can go to check out other events that are happening as part of the festival. And that doesn't just include in-person events. You've also got lots of online events. So if you're watching from further afield, there's plenty to still get involved in. One of them being a live stream, which will also be going out tomorrow evening, which is called Science and Sorcery, which is something a little bit different. We'll be showcasing a live streamed Dungeons and Dragons game, which will be taking players to a fictional island filled with dinosaurs and learning a little bit about the species and trying to survive the intensity of the island that they find themselves on. That's free to attend. You'll be able to watch that online. And the links for joining that are found at the Festival of Nature website, which is festivalofnature.org.uk. So we'll give it just a second, and hopefully the zoo team will be back with us very, very shortly. And the team are back. Let's bring them back in again.
We're back.
Hello, folks. Welcome back in. You're back. I'm going to bring us straight back into the stream.
Great.
Enough from me. You heard enough from me filling in the gaps. Back to Sam.
Perfect. Well, hopefully you managed to hear a little bit about ring-tailed lemurs from Sarah, and I'm sure hopefully she'll be able to answer any questions if you missed anything due to the connection problems. As Sarah said, ringtails live predominantly in the southwest of Madagascar, and most of our field projects are actually based in the northwest. Everyone, I guess, is aware of ring-tailed lemurs, and I guess you might be aware of some of the other species as well. But there are, in fact, well over 100 species of lemur, which represents almost a quarter of the global primate populations. So lemurs are a massively important biodiversity group, and within Madagascar they are endemic, so they're found nowhere else apart from Madagascar, which makes them evolutionarily really unique. They're incredibly important in terms of their role within Madagascar. A lot of the lemurs are really important in terms of seed dispersal agents. So in most ecosystems, birds are really important and they disperse seeds around the forest and around the habitat. But actually in Madagascar, lemurs do that job primarily. So within Madagascar, lemurs are incredibly important for the maintenance and the conservation and the preservation of the habitats there. Unfortunately though, Madagascar, along with its biodiversity, has really suffered over the last sort of 100 years or so as a result of deforestation and habitat degradation. It's an incredibly poor, economically poor country, and so rural people are more often than not forced to, unfortunately, rely upon the native forests for things like firewood and to create land for agriculture. And as a result, a lot of the forest has been cut down. So the remaining habitat is only about 10% or so of what it once was. And this has put incredible pressure on the wildlife, including lemurs. And so what we're trying to do is, along with many others, is trying to do our bit and trying to help that and restore that habitat that has been lost. So, as I said earlier, we work in the northwest of the country in the Saha-Malasa Ila-Radama National Park. And that is it's a marine and a terrestrial national park. And within the terrestrial side, within the land-based component of the national park, we have a number of species of lemur. We've got 4 or 5 species of lemur there, all of which are threatened with extinction. And as Sarah said earlier, the ringtails are endangered. And within Saha-Malasa, we've got some vulnerable species, we've got some endangered species, and we've also got 2 species of critically endangered lemur that are found predominantly nowhere else apart from the park. There's a few other little bits of forest outside, but predominantly their stronghold is within the park. And the forests that are left within the park are incredibly small and incredibly fragmented. So these species really are on the brink of extinction, and we're trying to help them to persist as long as possible, and hopefully perpetually. So the species our flagship species within the national park is the blue-eyed black lemur. And we have these at Bristol Zoo, although they're not on show at the moment. But if you'd visited over the last few years, you might have seen them in the lemur enclosures. So we've got a captive breeding program of them here, and we work with a number of European zoos to help bolster those captive populations. So we've got a number of different projects working within the national park, aiming at different areas and different things to try and help the lemur populations, as well as all the other wildlife there, and the human communities. So we've been working for many years now on trying to restore and reforest the national parks, and a number of organisations before us have tried to reforest by planting trees in the gaps between the fragmented forest to try and increase forest cover. And unfortunately, that hasn't really worked at all. And all of those hundreds of thousands of trees that have been planted have died, which is a real shame. So we took a step back a few years ago, and we thought, actually, this is a really difficult, challenging environment. For at least 6 months of the year, it's very, very hot and it's very dry. And we need to come up with another plan of how we can get trees to grow in this habitat so that we can start to create new forest. So we went back and we got some funding for the IUCN to go and do some experimental reforestation work to try and find a way to grow trees in this really dry, arid, austere environment. And we've been working really, really hard. And I must say that all of the work that we've done is done in conjunction, in collaboration with a team of Malagasy scientists that we employ out there who work for us, and they are phenomenal. So everything I'm talking about here, the credit really deserves to be given to them as well. So we've actually managed to find a way now to grow trees successfully within this environment. And just this year, we've started a big reforestation program that, using these new modified techniques where we can grow the appropriate species in the appropriate place in the appropriate way. So that's really, really exciting. And hopefully in the next few years, we'll start to see areas of new forest kind of cropping up. And hopefully we'll get new wildlife and provide new habitat for those critically endangered lemur species. What we also need to do is to come up with a really good estimate, really, of how many lemurs are left in the populations. We've got some estimates, but they aren't particularly brilliant. So another thing that we've been doing is an awful lot of surveying and an awful lot of monitoring, which involves basically going out into the forest and doing transect walks, so repeated walks within the forest, looking for lemurs and counting the number of lemurs. And that can be quite tricky because while the blue-eyed black lemurs tend to be active during the dawn and dusk periods, the other species are nocturnal lemurs, so they're only active at night. So you have to go out with head torches and look for those lemurs. And what's really nice is that, a bit like a cat's eye, lemurs have got a reflective surface on the back of their eye, so you can look for eye shine in the trees, which makes it a little bit easier. But obviously, the challenges of surveying in a forest at night are quite significant. But nonetheless, we're starting to get now some really, really good data on how many there are, which is really nice. And we're also managing to find that actually some of the lemur species that, particularly we have a little mouse lemur called the Sambarano mouse lemur, which is, as the name suggests, about the size of a mouse, and it will fit into the palm of your hand. A really tiny little lemur. We've actually just recently found that the distribution of that species is significantly increased as a result of some surveying effort that we and our colleagues have done. So that's really, really encouraging. We're finding new populations of what previously restricted species. So that's really, really exciting for us. we are also really keen to work with local communities as well, because that's what is the they are one of the unfortunate reasons why a lot of the pressures are happening. So we are engaging with local communities. So, for instance, with the reforestation work, we're encouraging them to grow trees and to create nurseries within their villages that will supply us with trees and also them as well. But we're also employing them to in the reforestation, and also employing them as guides and cooks and porters, and trying to get some alternative livelihoods really into that area, because people don't have to rely on the land so much as we can provide them with alternative ways of making a living and alternative ways to exist out there. Then it puts less pressure on the environment, and therefore that's a better option for the wildlife and the forests out there. So those are some of the things that we've been doing, and we're really looking forward to going forward in the future, particularly as we've now got a reforestation program that works, and we've got some really good survey data coming in, so we can start to evaluate what we need to do next. And one really exciting project that we're doing, a little bit further north, actually, it's not in the national park, but it's working in the cacao plantations a little bit further north. So those are plantations that people use to create chocolate, and we're working with a company called Beyond Good to examine the option or the possibility for human wildlife coexistence within these cacao plantations. And what we've seen is that actually loads of species of lemurs, 5 species of lemurs, inhabit and use these cacao plantations, and they call it home. And it doesn't appear that they cause any damage. And these cacao plantations have got really, they're very, very valuable for local communities. They provide a source of income, but they also provide a source of a habitat for lemurs, because the cacao plants are shade plants, so they're grown under an existing forest canopy. So suddenly that forest, because it contains the cacao plants, becomes very valuable to local people and local communities, so they're less likely to chop it down or to degrade it in any way. So that's really exciting, and that's one of the things that we're looking forward to. And I just want to finish by saying that, as I mentioned earlier, providing alternative livelihoods for local communities and local people is paramount, and it's the key way to reduce the pressure on the land. And one of the things that we're doing back in Sahamalaza now is we're building a new conservation and research field station there. And we're doing this in conjunction with some Bath-based colleagues at Andrew Grant Associates, Field and Clegg Bradley Studios, and Bureau Hapwell Engineering. And we've been working with them to build a state-of-the-art new research and conservation facility within the national park. And that's really, really important, because it allows people to go there and visit and to do research and to do conservation. And we know that when we get people on the ground doing research and conservation activities, local communities are much less likely to go into the forest, I guess, because there's a chance of them being caught and being observed. And so that's one really good way, positive way, that we can reduce human impacts on the forests. But also that provides, that will need jobs for that. We're going to need new guides, we're going to need new cooks and porters and managers and things like that. And so that's really good for the local community. It will also allow Malagasy scientists as well as international scientists to go there and to do research within a new state-of-the-art facility. And what's really, really cool about this is that, in conjunction with the folks in Bath that I mentioned earlier, we're using a new technology in Madagascar. So most buildings within Madagascar are made of bricks that are kind of formed from kind of river clay, and then they're kind of stacked in a kiln, and then local firewood or local wood is chopped down from the forests, and then burnt, and those bricks are then fired, and then they're used to build houses. So the bricks themselves are very they're not sustainable, because they rely on a lot of wood from the forest to be burnt, but also they're not very durable, because they're just made of clay. What we're doing is we've imported this kind of brick press from Kenya, and it's a bit like a garlic press really, and it squashes bricks into a pre-made form, and they're a bit like Lego. They kind of link together and block together, and so they don't need to be fired. You can just leave them out in the sun, of which there's an awful lot in Madagascar. And you leave them out in the sun for a few weeks, and it dries, and they go rock hard because they've got a little bit of cement in them. And so you can build it almost like a Lego house, really. And so our field centre is going to be made out of these, what we call interlocking stabilised soil blocks, and it provides a durable, sustainable way of making buildings. So once we've finished the research station, which will hopefully be the end of this year, early next year, then we're going to be able to loan that brick press out to local communities to make more buildings, whether it's schools or other establishments, clinics, maybe houses, anything that's useful for communities. And so we can start to help local communities to change their behaviour, I guess, in terms of how they construct things. So those are just some of the things that we've been doing in our Northern Madagascar project.
Thank you so much, Sarah and Sam, for going through with us the work that's going on at Bristol Zoo Gardens. Just so you know, we didn't lose you for very long when it cut out. We did hear quite a lot of what you were talking about, Sarah, when it comes to the lemurs that you've got. We've got just a couple of minutes, and I have a question that's come in from someone watching. So Rachel has asked, Sam, the brick press that we're just talking about, how much does one of them cost?
Off my head, I think that they're quite expensive because they're quite a bespoke piece of equipment made in Kenya. It was of the order of a few £1,000s, I think. But obviously you've got that you have shipping costs and the costs associated with getting things through customs. So it was quite a big investment to start with, but then it pays back massively because it's a long-term investment, I guess, in the project.
Okay, grand. Okay, I've got a couple of questions I wanted to ask. In terms of, let's say, I'm going to come to you just to ask about the lemurs themselves that you've got in the collection. They seem to be quite easy for you to tell apart. Like you were able to just spot them and tell which is which. How long does it take to get used to telling them apart?
That's a very good question, and thank you. It can take a while. They do look quite similar when you first start working with them. But I think them being primates, it's not so much just what they look like, it's their personalities as well. So after a while, you get to know which lemur would be doing what, which one's a little bit more dominant, where one likes to hang out, who they like to hang out with. So I think that really helps. So when you're trying to work out who's who, yes, you go by the way they look, but you also go a lot by what they're doing. And then once you know, you think, how could I ever not know? And they look as similar to me as you and me would. Like, they look that different to me now at this point, but it does take a little bit of time, but practice makes perfect.
And like you said about like the things they do, the way they act, they do seem to be very comfortable around like the humans that are in the zoo. I also wanted to ask about enrichment. So they are in a zoo collection. What sorts of things are they provided to kind of stimulate their brains? Because they seem very intelligent, very inquisitive animals.
Yeah, you're right, they are. We do a lot of enrichment here at the zoo across all species, but primates in particular, like you say, they have a high IQ. So we do need to make sure that they're constantly stimulated in lots of different ways, and there's lots of novel things to keep them interested. We actually give the lemurs a different piece of enrichment every single day. So we're always coming up with lots of different ways to do that. And there's a wide range of enrichment that you can do. It can be hiding food in something, but it also can be olfactory. So as I mentioned, they will scent mark. So maybe you could put different scents in the enclosure. It might be moving things around. Obviously, the environment they live in the wild is constantly changing. So you kind of make their environment here in the zoo the same. So we'll kind of move while they're perching around and things like that. And just the outside exhibit, is constantly changing. It is open to the elements. We've got things growing in here, so that's also constantly changing seasonally as well. Although the lemurs are primates, some of the more complex enrichment they sometimes struggle with. No judgment from me, but we don't put too complex puzzle feeders and things like that in there because they don't always understand it. But we find food is a very good motivation for lemurs, so they will do kind of basic puzzle feeders so we can hide food and things like that. And you'll notice their hands are very similar to ours, so they have the opposable thumbs, they're quite dexterous, so there is lots of object manipulation that they can do with that.
Motivated by food, I can very much empathize with that. That's something I can really see myself in a ring-tailed lemur. Sam, I'm going to come back to you. Just we've not got too much longer, but you mentioned about working with communities in Madagascar to get buy-in. What has the level of buy-in and support been from Malagasy communities to this project?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So traditionally it's been quite kind of tricky, I guess. But because there's a lot of Malagasy kind of culture and the communities are quite complex. There's lots of kind of cultural idiosyncrasies and variation, I guess, between different villages even. So it's all about really trying to understand and have dialogue with and work with very small localized communities, because they what happens in one village can be very different to what happens in another village. And so it's all about kind of working with individuals and local communities in that way. So some things, if it kind of goes against cultural kind of norms or cultural kind of expectations, it can be quite tricky to do that. But working with, as I said, we've got a fantastic Malagasy team who kind of have a really good understanding of some of the cultural kind of differences, or the variation there. So working with our Malagasy team, we are able to engage with them and show them and tell them exactly what we're doing and try and ask them to become involved. And so certainly, we've had really good success with local communities becoming interested in the reforestation work that we've done, because not only is the work, our research really good for us for planting trees to create new forests, but actually local communities are really interested in it, because it allows them to, it's beneficial for them if they know how to plant utility trees, whether it's mangoes or jackfruits or anything else within their local kind of villages. They want to learn from what we've learned. So there is definitely a lot of interest, certainly in that side of things, and providing alternatives, employing local communities and employing local people is really important. And I think a lot of people there are moving a little bit away from the short-term kind of focus on providing kind of food and providing things and from the forest towards a more medium-term outlook, which is really important. Yes, you could go into the forest and you could chop down some trees, and then you've got your firewood or your construction timber or whatever. But actually, that forest is really important, not just for biodiversity, but actually those people themselves. There's a massive erosion problem in Madagascar, where you chop down a forest and the soil, which is already very low fertility, kind of blows away or washes away in the wet season. And so, it's really important to keep that forest there. It also is really important for regulating water flow. So streams within the national park are very seasonal. There's very few streams that are flowing year round, but yet if you have a forest, the streams that do flow year round are the ones that are based within the forests. So if you want a more regular water flow, which is everyone wants, because for 6 months of the year it's bone dry, we need to have those trees there and that forest ecosystem there, of which lemurs are a critical component. And so there's a lot of we do a lot of work with an organisation of which BZS plays a key role, called the AEECL, and that's a community organisation that's run primarily by European zoos, but we run it within the national park in Saha-Malasa, and they are basically a very much a community focused organisation, where we build schools, because education there is very lacking. We build schools and we pay teachers salaries, and that's really important. The government there is not very strong, shall we say. And that weakness means that teachers often don't get paid and buildings don't get built or renovated, and so we step in and we are able to do that. And so we provide part of the package there really is that we pay teachers salaries and in return they teach a pro conservation, a pro environmental curriculum. So we've got all of these youngsters coming through the system there in Saha-Malasa who are thinking of conserving those in the natural heritage.
Oh, folks, I think just as we're getting to the end, oh, you're back. I'd lost your image for just a second, but we didn't lose what you were saying. So thank you so much for going through that with us. And that does bring us to the end of today's session. Thank you so much for coming to show us around the lemur walkthrough and for telling us about the incredible projects that are being run by Bristol Zoo Gardens in Madagascar. Thank you for taking the time to do that, and out of what I'm sure is a very busy day. So I'm going to use the power that I have to just bring it back to just me on the screen. I always love this bit. It's always loads of power. Thank you so much for those of you who've been watching, for the people who've popped some questions into the chat. Thank you to Bristol Zoo Gardens for being part of the Festival of Nature 2022. As I said at the beginning, the festival is in full flow at the moment. It is going on until Saturday the 18th of June. So there's still plenty of time to get involved in events that are taking place in Bristol and Bath, as well as some more events that are coming up online. So do check out www.festivalofnature.org.uk to find out a bit more of the things that are coming very, very soon. If you watch it back later as well, please tell us what you've enjoyed. You can ask more questions, leave them below these videos, whether you're watching on Facebook, YouTube, or Twitter. For now, though, take care, and we'll see you all very soon. Goodbye.